Have you noticed that suddenly everyone seems to be talking about peptides? They're everywhere. Social media is filled with dramatic before and after pictures. Influencers claim they're reversing aging, healing injuries, burning fat, building muscle, improving memory, and even extending life. But before you ever inject a peptide, there are a few things you absolutely need to understand, because the quality of the product, the condition of your body, and the medical judgment behind the treatment matter far more than the hype. I'm Dr. Kish Carlton, a board-certified family physician and the founder of Mind, Body, Spirit Medicine. In this series, I'm going to give you a physician's guide to peptide therapy, what these compounds are, where the evidence is strongest, where it is weak, and how to separate legitimate medical treatment from expensive hype or unsafe experimentation. Let's dive in. Peptides are short chains of amino acids that can act as signaling molecules throughout the body. Some peptide-based treatments are well established, FDA-approved medications. Others are prescribed off-label, prepared by compounding pharmacies, or remain experimental. So the word peptide by itself tells you almost nothing about the quality of the product, the strength of the evidence, or whether it is appropriate for you. Here's the first principle. A peptide is a signal, not raw material. It may tell the body to repair tissue, release a hormone, regulate inflammation, or change metabolism. But sending a signal does not guarantee that the body has the protein, vitamins, minerals, energy, and cellular capacity required to carry it out. Using peptides while ignoring those foundations can be like putting high-octane gasoline into a car that has no oil. You may push the system harder without giving it what it actually needs. Before considering a peptide, we need to define the problem we are actually trying to solve. That means reviewing your medical history, medications, sleep, nutrition, hormone status, kidney and liver function, and the appropriate baseline laboratory testing. If that evaluation reveals anemia, thyroid disease, insulin resistance, sleep apnea, or a meaningful nutrient deficiency, correcting the underlying problem may accomplish more than adding another peptide. The next question is where the product comes from. An FDA-approved peptide medication has undergone formal review for manufacturing, purity, dosing, safety, and effectiveness. A medication prepared by a state-licensed 503A compounding pharmacy is made for an individual patient's prescription under United States compounding standards, but the compounded medication itself is not FDA-approved. A vial labeled research use only, purchased online or imported from an unverifiable source, belongs in an entirely different risk category. A certificate of analysis is not the same thing as a trustworthy chain of custody. With an unverified vial, the unanswered questions are fundamental. Is the molecule actually what the label claims? Is the concentration accurate? Is it sterile? Could it contain endotoxin, residual solvents, or degradation products? Was it stored correctly throughout shipping? Even a polished certificate of analysis can be forged, outdated, or unrelated to the batch you received. And if something goes wrong, there may be no pharmacist, prescribing clinician, or accountable manufacturer standing behind that product. Even with a trustworthy product, the right peptide can still be wrong for the patient, or used at the wrong dose for the wrong reason. A responsible plan begins with a defined clinical target, appropriate baseline measurements, conservative dosing, and a clear way to judge whether the treatment is helping. Ideally, change one major variable at a time. Otherwise, benefits become anecdotes, side effects become difficult to trace, and nobody actually knows what produced the result. With peptide therapy, more is not automatically better. Monitoring should match both the therapy and the patient. Depending on the clinical goal, that might include symptoms, body composition, blood pressure, glucose control, hormone levels, IGF-1, blood counts, metabolic testing, or other targeted measurements. The goal is not to order every test imaginable. The goal is to measure what should reasonably change. If there is no defined endpoint, there is no rational way to decide whether to continue, adjust, or stop the treatment. A meaningful safety discussion cannot be reduced to saying that peptides are natural or that they already exist in the body. Peptide therapies can influence appetite, glucose regulation, fluid balance, blood pressure, hormone signaling, tissue growth, and immune activity. The relevant risks depend entirely on the specific compound in the patient, cancer history, pregnancy, endocrine disease, cardiovascular risk, kidney or liver dysfunction. Interacting medications and other clinical factors may change the risk-benefit calculation, and the absence of an immediate side effect does not prove that a treatment is safe. There are also practical warning signs. Be cautious when someone promises a cure, recommends the same dose to everyone, immediately sells a large stack of compounds, or never asks about your medical history, medications, or laboratory results. Other red flags include products sold without a prescription or pharmacy label, websites that say, "not for human consumption," while quietly providing injection instructions, and marketing built almost entirely around testimonials. A dramatic personal story may be sincere, but it is not the same thing as reliable clinical evidence. None of this means that peptide therapy should be dismissed. Some of the most important medications in modern medicine are peptides or peptide-based drugs. Insulin, semaglutide, tirzepatide, teriparatide, and others demonstrate that this class can produce powerful and clinically meaningful effects. But peptide is a chemical description, not a seal of safety or effectiveness. Evidence supporting one peptide does not transfer to another. Every compound requires its own evaluation of mechanism, human evidence, product quality, dosing, contraindications, and monitoring. I find it useful to think about evidence in layers. At the top are FDA-approved medications supported by controlled human trials and established manufacturing standards. Below that are compounds with smaller human studies or reasonable off-label clinical experience. Then come animal studies, laboratory findings, mechanistic theories, and finally personal testimonials. Mechanism matters, but mechanism is the beginning of the question, not the answer. A compound can make perfect biological sense and still fail to deliver a meaningful clinical benefit in real patients. Before starting any peptide, I would want 5 questions answered. What specific problem are we treating? Why was this particular compound selected? What level of human evidence supports its use? Who manufactured or compounded the product, and how can its identity and handling be verified? Finally, what will we monitor, and what would make us reduce the dose or stop treatment? If those questions cannot be answered clearly without falling back on marketing language, that is a reason to pause. Another commonly overlooked risk is measurement. A lyophilized vial may be labeled in milligrams, the prescribed dose may be discussed in micrograms, and the syringe may be marked in units. Those are not interchangeable measurements. Syringe units describe volume, not the actual amount of peptide. A reconstitution or decimal error can produce a 10-fold dosing mistake. Every patient should receive the exact concentration, prescribed dose, injection volume, storage instructions, and discard date in writing. Dosing should never depend on a social media screenshot or an unverified online calculator. Product quality can also be lost after it leaves the pharmacy. Follow the pharmacy's specific instructions for refrigeration, protection from light, reconstitution, travel, and the beyond use date. Do not assume that every peptide has the same storage requirements. Use clean hands, a new sterile syringe and needle for every injection, and the injection technique taught by your clinical team. Never share supplies and dispose of used sharps appropriately. Increasing redness, warmth, swelling, drainage, fever, or systemic symptoms should prompt medical evaluation rather than simply continuing the injections. Responsible peptide therapy looks less like buying a supplement and more like receiving medical care. There should be a clinical assessment, an explanation of expected benefits and uncertainties, informed consent, a legitimate prescription when required, a traceable pharmacy source, written dosing instructions, and a follow-up plan. There should also be a way to contact the treating team if questions or adverse effects arise. The product is only one part of the treatment. The clinical system surrounding it is what makes therapy safer and more accountable. The most useful mindset is neither blind enthusiasm nor automatic dismissal. Peptides are tools, and different tools deserve different levels of confidence. Some have strong clinical evidence and established medical uses. Others have promising but preliminary human data. Some are supported mainly by animal studies, laboratory findings, or anecdotes. In the next episodes, we'll examine individual compounds, including growth hormone, releasing peptides, BPC-157, TB-500, GHK-Cu, tesamorelin, PT-141, Cmax, Selank, and KPV so that we can separate mechanism, evidence, realistic expectations, and marketing. So before you inject anything, establish the clinical goal. Correct the foundational problems that may already explain your symptoms. Understand the actual level of evidence. Verify the product source and chain of custody. Confirm the exact concentration, dose, injection volume, storage requirements, and discard date. Decide what will be monitored and establish clear criteria for continuing or stopping. When those pieces are present, peptide therapy can be considered thoughtfully. When they are missing, the syringe should not be the first step. Peptides are not magic, and they are not automatically dangerous. They are tools, and the outcome depends on the evidence, the product, the patient, the dose, and the clinical system surrounding their use. I'm Dr. Kish Carlton, founder of Mind, Body, Spirit Medicine. If you are considering peptide therapy, work with a qualified clinician who will evaluate the complete picture rather than simply sell you a vial. If you found this helpful, subscribe and join me for the next episode, where we'll begin examining individual peptides, their mechanisms, potential uses, evidence, and limitations. Until then, be curious, ask better questions, and put safety before hype.